A soft, deliberate piano begins. The kind that settles into your chest before you've had time to put your defenses up. She looked at the campaign the intern had designed. 3 months of work. 1,000 small decisions that had never made it to any meeting because the intern's voice hadn't mattered in any meeting. And without looking at it long enough to actually see it, she told the room the campaign lacked imagination. That it was safe. That it was boring. And then she told the intern she was no longer needed. In the high-polished world of Whitmore Creative, success had a very specific look. It looked like a corner office with a view. It looked like a team of people with prestigious degrees from prestigious schools. It looked like Veronica Chen, the creative director, who had built her entire career on the certainty that she could walk into a room and instantly recognize good ideas. She had never been wrong. Or at least, she had never admitted to being wrong. And in an industry that rewards confidence the way some industries reward accuracy, the distinction barely mattered. Veronica managed 40 million in client accounts. She controlled the creative direction for brands that billions of people encountered every day. She had learned, early in her career, that confidence and competence were often mistaken for one another by people who weren't looking closely. And since most people weren't looking closely, she had built a kind of professional philosophy around that principle. You spoke with certainty. You moved like you knew exactly where you were going. You surrounded yourself with people who reflected your own certainty back at you. And you never, ever publicly questioned a decision you had already made. Because once you had committed to a direction, admitting you had been wrong became a kind of professional death. She trusted the team leads. She trusted the account directors. She trusted the credentials on the resumes and the schools listed under education and the logos of the companies where people had worked before. She did not, as a general principle, trust interns. Interns were temporary. They were placeholders. They were people on their way to somewhere else, not people who belonged here, not people whose ideas could actually matter. She did not know Maya Rodriguez. Not really. She knew her badge number. She knew that Maya had been assigned to the Vanguard account, which was the biggest account in the agency, a luxury consumer brand that had built itself on the promise of exclusivity and revolutionary thinking. She knew that Maya kept to herself mostly, didn't speak up in the big creative meetings, didn't seem to need the social architecture of the office the way other people did. She knew these things the way you know the things about people you have decided, without much actual examination, don't require much attention. What Veronica did not know was that 3 years earlier, Maya had been the lead visual strategist at a boutique creative collective in Mexico City. Not an intern. A director. Trusted. Seen. Building work that had won regional recognition and then, when the collective had dissolved, had disappeared from the circuit because Maya's visa had expired, and the process of renewal had been more complicated than the economics could justify. So Maya had come to Whitmore Creative as an intern. On paper, it made no sense. In practice, it had been the only option that kept her in the country where her daughter lived with her sister while Maya worked toward the paperwork that might eventually make a permanent situation possible. Nobody in the office knew that every evening, after her 8-hour shift answering phones and getting coffee and doing the small unseen tasks that allowed other people to do visible work, Maya sat at a desk in a shared apartment and worked on her daughter's video calls for 4 hours before sleeping for 5 hours and coming back. Nobody knew that the reason she was quiet in meetings was not because she had nothing to say, but because she had learned that speaking up when you were an intern often made people uncomfortable in ways that made them less likely to keep you around. Nobody knew because she had stopped announcing these things. It had not been a conscious decision, the way you make conscious decisions about your future. It had been more like a fact that had gradually settled over her the way facts often do. The people around her had decided what she was. And she had found that it was easier, sometimes, to let them keep that decision and conserve her energy for the other things that actually mattered. On the inside of her desk drawer, tucked against the corner, was a photograph of her daughter, Sophia, 7 years old, grinning in a blue school uniform, holding up a drawing she had made at school. The drawing was of her mother's hands. Sophia had spent an hour on those hands, the particular way they moved when her mother was thinking through a problem, the specific gesture of how she pointed at things when she was explaining an idea. Sophia had caught something true about her mother in those hands that adults often miss about one another. The Vanguard account was, in the language of advertising, a prestige challenge. Vanguard had lost market share to newer, more agile competitors. Younger consumers thought the brand was outdated. The brief was brutal in its simplicity: make Vanguard feel revolutionary again, or Vanguard would take their $40 million to another agency. Veronica had brought in the top team leads. She had gathered the people with the right names and the right track records. They brainstormed. They mood-boarded. They debated concepts that all looked, in the end, like every other luxury brand campaign that had ever been made. Sleek. Minimalist. Exclusive. Safe. Maya was not in those meetings. She was in the back, organizing reference materials, making sure the creative team had everything they needed to do the work that everyone already agreed needed to be done. She was invisible in the way that interns are invisible, the way support staff are invisible, the way people become invisible when the system has already decided what role they play. And she was thinking. She had spent her career before Whitmore studying how people actually looked at luxury. Not how they were supposed to look at it, but how they actually looked at it. The gap between those two things was where everything interesting lived. Luxury, she had come to understand, was not a product. It was a story about who you were if you bought the product. And the most powerful luxury story was not, you are exclusive. It was, you are brave enough to be different. But she was an intern. And interns did not go to the creative director and tell her she had everything backwards. So instead, she built the campaign at night. She built it the way her mother had taught her to build things, with the kind of patience that reserves no right to be seen. She built it on a second-hand laptop in the quiet hours when the office was empty and the only light was the blue glow of the screen and her own attention. She built it knowing that if anyone found out, it would be seen as overstepping, as presumptuous, as an intern thinking she belonged in spaces where she did not belong. The campaign was called Parallel. The concept was deceptively simple. Vanguard was going to show, side by side, two versions of every luxury object they made. One was the version everyone expected. Clean. Minimalist. Whisper quiet in its certainty. The other was the version that was real. The version inside. The craftsmanship visible. The choices laid bare. The person who made it visible next to what they made. It was a campaign that said, we are not hiding from the complexity of who we are. We are inviting you to see it. We are revolutionary not because we are sleek. We are revolutionary because we are brave enough to be seen. Every visual was designed with a particular kind of intelligence. The color palette was risky, warm golds against deep charcoal, not the cool silvers that everyone expected from luxury. The photography was intimate, almost vulnerable. The copy was direct in a way that made space for actual human emotion instead of the usual performance of exclusivity. It was work that could only have been made by someone who had spent years studying how people actually felt, not how they were supposed to feel. It was work that could only have been made by someone who understood the hidden architecture of desire and trust and the way people actually bought things when nobody was watching them. And it was work that would sit on Maya's computer, unseen, because Maya was an intern and interns did not show up to creative meetings with full campaigns. But the Vanguard deadline was approaching. And the work that the team had been building, the safe work, the expected work, was not connecting with anyone. The client was disappointed. The account director was nervous. Veronica could feel the momentum shifting away from her, and she did not like the feeling of things moving outside her control. She needed something. She did not know what. But she knew it needed to be soon. It was an accident that anyone found out. Maya had been working late, preparing presentation materials for the next day's client meeting, when she accidentally left her laptop unlocked at her desk. One of the junior account coordinators, a young man named Derek who actually liked Maya and respected her quiet competence, sat down to grab something from the shared drive. Instead, he saw it. The campaign. All of it. He knew immediately that it was something. He also knew immediately that it had not come from anywhere official. The care in it. The specificity. The way every choice spoke to someone who actually understood the problem instead of someone who was just following a template of what luxury was supposed to be. He copied the file. He did not ask Maya. He did not give her a chance to stop him. He just knew that something true was about to be erased by the machinery of professional politeness, and he made a choice. That evening, he sent the file to Veronica with a single line, "I think you need to look at this." Veronica opened the file at 11:47 p.m., alone in her office, with the city stretching out below her like something she owned. She looked at the campaign. She looked at it the way you look at something when your first instinct is to defend the system you have already committed to, and then you realize that the system is not actually serving what you thought it was serving. The campaign was better. It was not slightly better. It was not marginally better in small ways that could be explained by a different artistic sensibility. It was better in the way that something true is better than something false. It was better in the way that actual understanding is better than performed certainty. And it had come from the intern. The quiet one. The one she had never really looked at. The one who had been present in her office for 4 months and whom she had managed to dismiss so completely that she did not even know Maya's last name. Veronica's first instinct was to take the work. To present it as a collaborative discovery. To let it become part of the agency's output and take credit for having shaped it, guided it, seen its potential. She had done this before. It was how the system worked. It was how people like her maintained the position they occupied. But something in the work itself resisted that. There was an integrity in it that made the lie not just unethical but impossible. This was not something that could be claimed by someone else without something essential breaking. The next morning, Veronica did something she had not done in years. She admitted she was wrong. She called Maya into her office. Not to praise her, not yet. To ask her a question. "This campaign," Veronica said. "Why didn't you show me this?" And Maya, who had prepared for this moment in 100 different ways, who had rehearsed the response that would not seem too ambitious, not seem like she was overstepping, not seem like an intern getting ideas above her station, instead told the truth. "Because I didn't think you would see it," Maya said. "I thought you would see an intern's work and evaluate it like it was intern work. I didn't think you were looking at what was actually there." It was the kind of honesty that costs something to give, and everyone who gives it knows exactly what the cost is. Veronica looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Show me everything. Tell me how you built this. Walk me through every decision." And Maya did. They worked through that day and the next, not with Veronica directing and Maya executing, but with Veronica asking questions and listening to the answers. Really listening. The way she had never really listened to anyone who didn't already have the credential to command her attention. The Vanguard pitch was scheduled for Friday. Veronica made a choice that would have been impossible for her to make a week earlier. She put Maya on the presentation. Not as a supporting element. As the person who would walk the client through the thinking. The agency's internal politics shifted instantly. People who had never noticed Maya before suddenly had opinions about whether an intern should be representing the agency to a client. Whether it was appropriate. Whether it reflected well on the firm. The subtext of all of it was clear: who did this girl think she was? Veronica said no. She said that this campaign came from Maya, and if Vanguard wanted to understand it, they needed to hear it from the person who had actually built it. She said this knowing it was a risk. She said it anyway. Maya walked into the Vanguard boardroom on Friday morning. She was 29 years old and had not been given this kind of space to be seen in almost 3 years. She carried the presentation the way you carry something that matters, not with the performance of confidence, but with the simple certainty of someone who knows what they are talking about because they have spent hundreds of hours thinking about it. She showed them parallel. She explained the thinking. She talked about the gap between how luxury is supposed to feel and how it actually makes people feel. She showed them research, not in the abstract, but grounded in real human behavior, in the actual patterns of how people engaged with objects when they believed in them versus when they were just performing belief. She talked about the color palette not as an aesthetic choice but as a communication choice. She walked them through every decision the way someone walks through something they have built with their own hands, with clarity and humility and certainty. The Vanguard CEO, a man who had spent 40 years in luxury, sat in silence for a long moment after she finished. Then he said, "This is the best work we have ever seen from an agency. When can you start? Not if you can start. When?" The campaign launched 6 months later. It was scaled across television, print, digital, experiential installations. It became the kind of campaign that other agencies studied. Industry publications called it revolutionary. It won the Cannes Lion. Then it won the Grand Prix. Then it won the Global Marketing Award, the one that matters most because it is voted on by thousands of industry professionals who have no stake in any individual campaign's success. And when Veronica took the stage to accept the award, she did something else she had never done. She gave the award to Maya. She put it in her hands in front of the entire industry and said, clearly and into the microphone, "This work is hers. I almost didn't let her make it because I was not actually looking. Thank you for building something good enough that even I could eventually see it." It was a small gesture. In the grand machinery of professional advancement, it was almost nothing. And it changed everything about how Maya was able to move through the world. The industry noticed. Other agencies approached her. But Maya did not leave Whitmore. Instead, she asked for something else, a director title. The actual position. Not the credentialing of an earned promotion, but the recognition that what she had been doing all along was work that mattered. Veronica said yes. That evening, Maya sat in the small apartment with Sophia, who was now 8 years old and wore a school uniform with the same unself-conscious confidence that children have about who they are before the world teaches them anything different. Sophia showed her mother a new drawing. It was of hands again. But this time the hands were holding something. Building something. Making something visible. "Are these your hands?" Sophia asked. "These are all our hands," Maya said. "Mine and yours and your aunt's and everyone who helped us get here." In the months that followed, Maya restructured the entire creative department at Whitmore. Not to fire people who had been overlooked, but to build systems where what you could do actually mattered more than where you had come from. She hired people with different backgrounds, different paths to the same expertise. She built teams where the best idea could come from anyone, and the first job of leadership was to actually look. Some of the team leads who had been displaced by this restructuring left. They went to other agencies where the old systems still worked, where credentials still mattered more than capability, where certain people were still invisible by design. Others stayed and learned, with varying degrees of willingness, that the certainty they had built their careers on had been partly accident and partly arrogance all along. Veronica, for her part, had to confront something harder than admitting she was wrong about a single campaign. She had to confront that she had built her entire career on a fundamental misreading of how you actually recognize talent. She had been so certain about what excellence looked like that she had missed actual excellence when it was standing in front of her, coffee in hand, quiet and competent and invisible. It was not a comfortable realization. It required her to look back at how many other people she had dismissed based on criteria that had nothing to do with actual ability. It required her to wonder what other brilliant work had been built in the margins, unseen, by people she had decided did not deserve her attention. The gap between performing competence and actually having it is sometimes invisible until the moment it is not. Sometimes the most creative person in the room is the one you have decided to stop looking at. Sometimes the revolutionary campaign is being built at night by someone whose badge says, Intern, but whose hands understand something your certainty has missed. Sometimes a person has to stop performing the role everyone has assigned to them before the world can finally see what they have actually been building all along. Look at who builds things when they are not being watched. Look at who works in the margins with the same care they would use if the whole world was paying attention. Look at who stays quiet because speaking up would cost them the opportunity to stay. Those are the people who are actually making things. Those are the people worth seeing. If this story moved something in you, if you saw yourself in Maya's quiet competence or in the systems that make people invisible, please take a moment right now to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who has been dismissed. Someone who is building brilliant things in the margins, waiting to be seen. Subscribe to Pure Kindness so you never miss a story about the quiet work happening all around us, the hidden competence living inside ordinary days, the revolutionary campaigns being built by the people we have decided to stop looking at. And drop a comment below. Has there been a moment in your own life when someone finally looked past the role you were assigned and saw what you were actually capable of? Tell us your story. Every single one matters, and we genuinely want to hear it.